Okie dokie, things progressing nicely on our 3300 rebuilds. Both these engines came in, we've got about 4 engines on the go, but these two are sort of top of the queue. These engines came in for 1,000-hour overhauls, so it's a full rebuild, new bearings. Any machine work that needs to be done was done. New seals right through, cylinders honed, piston rings, pistons, the whole lot, valves. So yep, this one's coming together. The bottom end's all reassembled. I've got the accessory section back together there. All new seals right through. All new bolts in there on the flywheel. This engine's interestingly, I should say, has got our ignition module there, or hall sensor there. So the idea is the hall sensor literally replaces one of the coils, and it detects that magnet that's right in position now. The clearance between the hall sensor and the magnet is actually not important as long as it's got some clearance, because it's a very sensitive little switch in there. And that of course triggers an electronic module and then fires the coil at 30,000 volts. Now, one of the good things about the ignition is it doesn't require any cranking speed, and if you were silly enough, you could even hand start the engine, which is unheard of for Jabiru. So it doesn't require any cranking speed at all. It'll have the 30,000 volts the moment that magnet at any speed goes past that hall sensor. Unlike the Magneto here, which actually has the very weakest spark at cranking, and its spark gets hotter as the engine RPM increases. But increase in engine RPM is pretty useless to you if you can't get the engine started in the first place. So the problem with a Magneto like this, which is not impulse coupled, is that at the slow cranking speeds, it has a very, very weak spark. And that's why a lot of Jabirus have trouble starting in the cold or have trouble starting in general. This, of course, solves that. And we find that, but this is an externally energized system. So we find our philosophy is that in combination, these two make a very powerful ignition system. This one's self-energized, but with a weak spark at cranking. This one externally energized with a very hot spark at cranking. So you've really got the best of both worlds. And to have a complete ignition failure, you'd have to be extremely unlucky. Anyway, so that's that engine. Now, this engine here is a little bit further along. It's the same 1,000-hour rebuild. It has a slightly different ignition setup. This one here actually has the Jabiru booster system, which we don't believe is quite as efficient as ours, because it relies on just basically wrapping the coil with some extra windings. It's pretty crude, actually. You see what they've done is they've wound some extra wires around the outside of the coil to give it more flux at cranking. And this electronic module is only in play when you're cranking. When that electronic module is in play, it's basically it basically shoots a high voltage into this extended primary circuit, which then gives you a higher output voltage. Look, the system does work, but it's not as powerful as ours. It's not as effective as ours. And this is only designed to come into play on cranking, and then you go back to your traditional mag after starting. So that's how that one works. But anyway, that one's going to stay like that. The rest of the engine's been rebuilt to the same as that one there. It's just a little bit further along. Again, it's a 1,000-hour overhaul. Just behind me here, the cylinder heads that are going to go on that engine are here. As you see, they've been fully machined. Valves ground and inspected, new guides, seats, the whole shoot and match. So they're going to be lovely. Now, these are, of course, the original thin-finned air-cooled heads. They've been machined. They're to specification. How long they're going to last is another story. Personally, I would prefer to go LCH, but in this instance, the customer wants to retain his air-cooled engine, and that's fine. We do the best we can with what he's got there, and as I said, those heads are machine true, and they, at least in the short term, and if he looks after them, they should last a while. Yep, so all the rocker arms are in. It's a hydraulic engine, so it's got all your hydraulic lifters there. Flat tappet. And that's that. So that should be finished, I'd expect, over the next day or two. That should be ready. And the other one there should be ready shortly after. Now that second engine there is laid out here, and there are the cylinder heads for that second engine. And these ones likewise have been machined. We're still yet to put the seats and guides in because we still have to machine the valve pockets, and that'll be good. Everything else is ready. Cylinders, pistons are ready. Everything's been honed like new. And by the way, we have a honing machine. We don't use like one of those cheap dunny brushes or things from eBay. We use a proper sun and hone to do all this. Yeah, and then the rest of that will all go together. As you see, everything's prepared, cleaned, and it should be good. And interestingly, we've got another engine here that's being rebuilt, and it's here. This is a very early 2200. Very early 2200, and as you can see, the heads have been machined, and we had to weld the little bridge in between the valves, not because it was cracked, but because they were badly eroded between the two valve pockets. So that's been welded, and that'll be machined, and we'll put new guides and seats in that, and that'll get that engine going again. Interestingly, which I found surprising, was that the recessing on these heads, even though we've remachined them now, was actually less than what we see on the later heads, despite what would appear to be much less finning or cooling area. They exhibited less recession in that spigot there where the cylinder meets, which was interesting. So my feeling is that once these are reconditioned, they'll work. They'll certainly work for as long as they worked in the past. Anyway, that's where we're at. This will be an interesting engine when it's all done.